Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. When you look at our society in the dry season, you can look at parched dry land and say nothing is growing. That's one way of looking at it. But from experience, we know that in a few months, once rain falls, that dry land had the potential for a lot of green, a lot of flowers, a lot of fruit and nutrition for the whole society. So as we look at our society, as we ask ourselves, when we see problems, what really do we see? Is it really a problem, or have we just problematized a situation, giving it a label called a problem instead of a challenge to our innovativeness, our ability to create something valuable? In the past, waste used to be viewed as a problem. Pollution was a problem. But what happened? We changed the way we saw waste. We looked at it as something that actually could be moved from being waste to being a form of wealth. And then we actually started teaching in universities waste management, because people were making millions from what an earlier generation was calling waste and a problem of what do we do with this. How we think generally, when you look at conflict and problems in society, especially those that deal with a disconnect, and how sometimes our education seems to have educated us out of understanding how the people we want to help even think. And so usually our problem with Almajiris, as is the problem with out-of-school children, is to have stereotypes about them. Very uneducated and therefore not intelligent, not very exposed. There are liabilities, there are problems in our society, and what that does is a stereotype evolves into a prejudice. And a prejudice leads to discrimination because you have prejudged others. And with that, the leadership starts to use prejudice and discrimination unconsciously to build structural forms of injustice that just keep the poorest out of the loop of even our plans. They're not even in our thought regarding the climate we work in. We sometimes view them, the Almajiris, as a problem, a cultural embarrassment, wasted lives, instead of looking at them as probably human potential untapped, a demographic dividend we have not found a way of turning from what looks like a liability, what used to be waste, to actually an asset for growth. And yes, there are millions of them coming up as we move into the future. But problem number one, to recognize that unless we change the climate in our heads and try to make it rain, it will not change the barren land that we see. And so we are told, be the change that you hope to see in the world. What can be done before 2050? In other words, in the next 25 years. This is a period during which Nigeria will move from being about 240 to about 450 to 500 million. If you're trying to slow down that population growth rate, it's too late. Because the population that is going to hit that 500 million, that's the population that's going to be the children of our children. And if our children have already been born, and you want to have grandchildren, then it's too late. That population is coming. And I believe this is not a challenge that is an infinite game. It's not like health problems. 100 years from now, we will still have health problems. 500 years from now, we will still have health problems. Maybe some different, but some will continue. 1,000 years from now, we will still have poverty of some form or the other, relative poverty. We will still have crime and criminals. But we don't have to still have Almajiris in more than 25 years. The government has set up an Almajiri Commission. I would have recommended that the government gives the Almajiri Commission 20 years in which to get its job and then close it down, and not turn it into another ministry that is dealing with an infinite problem as if it's to move into the future. We don't hope to move into the future. We are hopeful that the extra 100 million that's going to come up, most likely in the lifetime of most of us, have actually become assets. The word Almajiri comes from the word muhajir, a migrant, somebody who traveled in search of knowledge. Somebody who, and there's nothing new about traveling in search of knowledge. Some of us traveled to ABU Zaria in search of knowledge. When I was doing my NYSC in Oru, Ijebu, I actually found they had boarding facilities for primary schools, so that people who lived in those interior villages that were too far from the primary school could actually send their children to boarding schools, primary school. It wasn't viewed as irresponsible. It was what would help give the children a better future. This is not new, that villagers will send their children to town to study and learn. And what did they learn? Today we call it a religious curriculum, but all you need to do is ask ChatGPT, give you a table of content of the books that they study. They would usually start with how to read Quran and Hadith, but then very quickly they go into how to perform ablution and pray and fast and do the 5 pillars of Islam, and then they quickly go into the books on marriage, the books on Islamic finance and trade, political thought, the laws of war and peace, administration, how to be judges. Why? Because that system was preparing people to run a caliphate, to run a Kanem Borno empire. These were proud people and they had an educational system that worked. Today, however, most of the graduates are not going to run any empire. Many of them, unfortunately, go through a curriculum that is not enriching. Many of them have actually become dropouts of the old system. They have to resort to begging. They still come to town, their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers did, because we know the towns have the bigger opportunities. The problem with the Almajiri is really not a problem of the Almajiri identity. It's the opportunities we make available or don't. They are actually victims of neglect, victims of discrimination when it comes to policy, victim of our inability to think on their behalf. We want to do things with them but without them. As a general rule, nothing about us without us. Nothing about youth without youth. Nothing about women without women. And no planning for Almajiris if Almajiris are not there at the table to tell you it will work or not work. Jonathan, God bless his soul, for one initiative among many, I'm sure, building Sangaya schools, and enough schools that no other president did before him. But there was no consultation. So you find a Sangaya school in the middle of nowhere that is too far for anybody to go to. Somebody in Abuja probably was just using Google Maps to say, let's put another one here. If you want to know how long, or how long will it take for the population to double, so if we are 240 or so million, the formula is just to do 70 divided by the population growth rate. Very simple formula. So Nigeria has a growth rate of approximately 3.4, 2.7 to 3.4. Ogun State, it's approximately 3.5. Katsina is approximately 7.3. Among the Almajiris and that poor community, it's approximately 6.6. That's a big number. That doubles in less than 15 years. That doubles before 2025. What usually happens in populations from villages is you are born in the village like my grandfather, study in the village, and then move to a town. He was born in Dabang, but he moved to Lemu, a bigger village. But then my dad was born in Lemu, but he worked in a town. I'm born in a town, and I work in a town and a city. My children are born in the city, but they start to go to capital cities and overseas. And that's usually the evolution. But the point being, when it comes to one at the top of the pyramid, and that one could be one individual, it could be Zainab, it could be Audu. That one individual could actually be 100,000. It could be 1 million Almajiris. But one, if you can change that one, look what happens in 3 generations. That one usually has up to 6 children surviving. They would usually have up to 9 or 10 children. Why? It's in, insurance for retirement. About 3 of the children will die anyway. About 2 will die in childbirth or before the age of 5. Another 1 or 2 will die because they just can't afford the medication. So let's not look at the big problem as if this is a big problem, this is a challenge. No, ask yourself, by the time this challenge multiplies, who's going to solve it if government spending on education has continued to come down since 2014? The changes that happen to just one person has a major ripple effect down the generation. In the typical life of an Almajiri, you can divide their lives into 3 phases. The first 7 years, they're usually spending most time with their parents. But over the last 15 to 20 years, they have found that about more and more of age 5, 6, 7 are now into begging. Go to the junction in Pakungu and just look around and see who is selling pure water on a tray, who is selling cashews on a tray. From the years of around 7, 8 to 13, 14, they carry on with their Islamia Karatu, but this is the time where they do a lot of begging. Begging is their way of begging for scholarship to survive, to continue their education. It's not that they enjoy begging. It's not they enjoy being behind the glass of your door, not even saying hi. The minimum you can say is, Allah bada hakuri. The minimum you can do is a little prayer, even if you're not going to help a fellow human being. Had God willed, it would have been you in that position. But from the age of 14, they disappear from the roadside beggars. They are now selling sugarcane, oranges. They are shoe shiners. They're the ones selling dates. They're running after your car to sell something. They want a better future for themselves. They're looking for economic opportunities. I have trained classrooms in over 30 countries in the world. And I do a lot of training on interfaith, on extremism, blah, blah, blah. I have never come across a class of students so eager to learn than a class of Almajiris that are 14 years and above. Their journey is not uniform. Some of them have a patron, somebody who also takes them to school. But there's something in common with most of them, narrowing horizons and narrowing of the opportunities they have for life. That the one who did a shoe shiner would most likely end as a shoe shiner for life. The one who was working on the construction site will have an injury eventually and can't continue and won't be able to climb the ladder in that career. Very low earn type of labor. Why should this matter to us? And I looked carefully. That's actually a lizard on the head of the person sleeping there. It's a wretched life. And if we have any amount of a heart, our moral ambition will help us do something, however little. The Sahara Desert is moving at about 3 kilometers per year. That's the speed of desertification. Just visit Katsina and you will ask yourself, how do people survive here? Banditry pushing them away from the farms. IDPs, and they can't sustain themselves. So they send them to town and they knock on your glass. And you can't even say hi. Why? Because some of us think, if I help him, he will stay there forever. No, he will not stay there forever. By the age of 14, he has a better future to live. And if we don't solve this problem, we will hear more of other problems. They may be called religious problem, ethnic problems, indigenous settler problems. At the core, it's poverty. Why? Go to any state in Nigeria that has problems between Hausas and Biroms, Muslims, and just go everywhere. You don't see the conflict in the GRA. It's where the poor live. And you have to ask yourself, why does the conflict pick there? If it's tribal, why is it not in the GRA? If it's religious, why isn't it in the GRA areas? Why is it always where the poor live? It determines the kind of legacy we will hand over for our children to try and solve. This is not a problem of the North, nor is it a Muslim problem. This is a national crisis. It's our socio-economic security of a nation that is on the line. And the challenge is going with a rising tide of over 20 million people and counting. If you have 10 million and they are growing at a rate of just 3%, not 6, 3%, 10 million at 3% is an additional 300,000 a year. How many schools are we building to absorb 300,000 a year? Not to talk of what is the population that is outside that. It's a human and economic issue, not religious, so don't get distracted. It's religion. No, we've worked with the religious scholars. There's always a nutcase in every religion who will try to defend rubbish, defend Boko Haram, defend Almajiri, defend out of school, defend. There's always that one. But you don't listen to the side lonely voice. Look at the majority. The conventional educational system we currently have is 12 years to go through primary, 12 years of secondary. If you add nursery, it's more than that. This is not going to solve our problem. It's how we were raised, and unfortunately we think what is good for the goose would be good for the gander. But if the government is not building enough schools, the biggest amount of corruption usually for politicians is to look at the Ministry of Education subhead for textbooks. Every year it is being given, but you don't see the textbooks. Education is suffering. When it comes to our educational system, we need to find a way of equipping a 14, 15, 20-year-old Almajiri in a few months, not years, and just be churning them out. The educational system is like the factory that produces the next leadership and turning people as liabilities, as children in one end, and coming out the other end as assets. Can we build a factory that is faster? So something that was started by my late honorable mother, Sheikh Lemu, over 10 years ago, was to start using the classes of the New Horizons Primary School and the New Horizons College to become a weekend school for Almajiri children. But it was going to take them through our system. Yes, it was accelerated. And children who had spent 4 years in that school could read and write better than children who are in government secondary schools, SS2. But this was not going to be sustainable if you look at the size of the problem. So what we decided, let's leave that age group and go to a group that we could deal with within 1 year. And so we came up with the ASAP, Accelerated Skills Acquisition Program. This was a 1-year program that would bring Almajiris in to existing schools, so no need to build new infrastructure. It's just to use existing classrooms. No need to spend money. Train them to be able to functionally read and write in 2 to maximum 4 months. How can you get somebody to read a newspaper in 3 to 4 months? Is it possible? Yes. Just change the language and stop thinking like an Oyibo. The Almajiri boy or a girl can read Alam Tara Kaifa. They can write Tabat Yada. They can read, they can write. They just don't understand Arabic. Check your 1,000 naira note. At the bottom there, it looks like Arabic. It's Hausa, and it says Naira Dubu Daya. So we teach them Ajami. And in less than 3 months, they are able to read a newspaper that is in Ajami. Triumph in Kanu publish Al-Fijr newspaper every week with updates on Nigeria. And they've been doing it from colonial period. Ahmadu Bello University faculty, the NAERLS, the National Agricultural Liaison and Extension Services, they actually have a desk office for translating agricultural extension material from English into Ajami, because rural farmers can still read and write in Ajami. They are not illiterate. They're only illiterate when you insist it has to be in English, but they don't need English. Most countries in the world did not need English. The Chinese don't need English to be educated. The Finns don't need it. The Swedish don't need it. The French don't need it. The Ethiopians don't need it. The Singaporeans don't need it. And you carry on, Malaysia. Just think about it. We insist that our children, if they are to learn to read and write, they must learn to read and write in the vernacular. English is our vernacular. The Almajiri doesn't need it. Pidgin English, fine. But take your car for repair, you will be speaking Hausa. Go and look for a carpenter, you will be speaking Hausa. So why insist that this child must learn English just because you want to teach them carpentry? So for the first 6 months, for the first 4 months, it used to be 6 months when we were using classrooms, and then some generous organization, Mainstream Foundation, God bless them, a few others also, built us our own center. Good, but I'm saying you don't need your own center. You can use existing classes. We needed workshops. Where are they to learn these guilds? We taught them how to read and write in Ajami. Then we started teaching them how to read and write in Hausa and how to speak Pidgin English. We met with mechanics and tailors and carpenters, cosmetic people, all of them. What amount of maths did you need to succeed? Not what amount of mathematics is in the primary school textbook. No. What amount of maths did you need to succeed? Let's get that maths, and that's what we're going to teach these children. Not maths they won't need, but maths that the society actually needs if they are to function and exceed. What we then did, if you see this diagram, is identify existing workshops, carpenter's workshop, mechanic workshop in the city. Instead of going to build one vocational center somewhere, treat the city as your university. And let the students go to the various departments, depending on which was close to you. So again, instead of starting with big infrastructure, we need equipment. No, you don't need equipment. The mechanic already has the equipment. The carpenter already has the working tools, etc. If you're going to do anything, give more tools to the carpenter. Give better sewing machines to the person doing the sewing machine. You build the local economy, but that becomes the school where the next students will be going to learn. But they go to learn tailoring with an added advantage. You teach them how to use Google Translate. You teach them how to translate something in English they don't understand into Hausa, and Google can do it. ChatGPT can do it. Teach them those skills. Now ChatGPT can even recite it aloud for them to hear what was said in Indonesian or in Hindi. Teach them how to go onto YouTube to check what other countries are doing. And in 6 months to 8 months of apprenticeship, they are skilled laborers ready to move out into the workforce. We do 50 boys, 50 girls in each cohort. We graduate between 150 to 200 every year. This is not some theoretical proposal. I'm telling you what has been working over the years. The nomadic educational system, really interesting educational system. It's been used in different parts of the world. Europe have a group they call the Gypsies or the Romas. They are their own nomadic people, never settled, always moving around. It's good to find out, how did France and Italy and these countries, what did they do with their own Roma population? Instead of insisting that these nomadic rural people should come to school, they took the schools to them. Teach them in whatever language will give them a bigger level of education, more alternative futures. And then what happened? Instead of carrying on with a nomadic lifestyle, because they are more educated and they have other skills, there are simpler, more profitable lifestyles for the next generation. You don't need to fight the nomads. Just give them the education and opportunities they are asking for. They will give you the better future of turning their children not from future liabilities, but assets to our demography. When somebody has fallen and is on the ground, do you stand and tell him, get up, let me help you? Or do you go down, be with him, and come up together? If you really want to help them, you go down to their level. Understand how they think. Talk with them. Are you ready to come up? No, you are going too fast. Let them guide you as you give them more opportunities. It reminds me of the redemption song for my generation. There was one Jamaican singer, Bob Marley. And in one of his songs, he makes a statement. And he says, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And I think that continues to ring as true for all of us. If I were to go and do another master's degree or another PhD, or not another, just to do a PhD, I will come back not creating a new job for anybody, but probably just being better at what I do. But if you teach Audu to be a carpenter, he can't work alone. He needs somebody to hold the ladder, somebody to hold the wood. He becomes a job creator. You don't need to create jobs for all Almajiris. Just target 30, 50% of them. They will solve the rest of their problem. So don't look at the problem as some big, huge Goliath of a tsunami that there's nothing we can do. No, we can do a lot. They will do the rest. So the key things here, shorter circles of education. Don't go through the big education. Those who can, fine, 12 years. But you can do a lot within just 12 months. Teach in local language. Don't be embarrassed about your local language. Managing it based on the objective. What's the objective? These people have better livelihood security. Then give it to them in the language that is fastest. Yes, you do that, but there's another important thing. Using local apprentices, and they need scholarship. You can say, but there's UBE, Universal Basic Education. It's free. Yeah, it's free because we can afford to feed our children. But the poor Almajiri, who is not sure where breakfast is going to come from, even at 12 noon, not sure about lunch or dinner, priority is to be able to feed himself, to take care of himself, and to take care of Malam, where he basically has to pay some rent for his accommodation, and Mata Malam will do some feeding. So it's not as simple as simply saying, here's a school. It's like saying, I've got you an admission to Cambridge. Wow, mashallah, yeah, but the school fees is. Then what? Yeah, it's useless. The same thing with the Almajiris. If we realize that for a good education, and for many education, government needs to subsidize, but it's removed the subsidies due to structural adjustment programs. It's closed down a lot of boarding schools. Let us give scholarships for these children, the way the Oga landlord and others are doing. For donors, the need to move away from a toxic form of charity where you continue to give somebody handouts. What that does, and as we've seen it in our own families, every time you are giving them once a month, here's something, here's something. It's charity and they say thank you and they are grateful. But the month you stop, they start expecting. What started as thank you for your charity, it starts getting expected. You continue, it moves from expectation to entitlement. They call you, I didn't see my alert. You have started to create dependency. And yes, it is good to teach people how to fish, not just give them a fish. But please remember, even if you teach people how to fish, if you have not helped them think like fishermen, you will give them all the tools. They will just sell the nets and go back to their normal life. This is not about anybody feeling guilty, but about us being responsible to just think more clearly about our future. Call it strategic patriotism. Call it enlightened self-interest, or you call it moral ambition. But it is in our own collective interest to solve the problems of this demographic. My prayer is that this generation will be the one that is able to end the continuation of the challenges we call the Almajiri, to recognize them as potential assets, not liabilities. Thank you very much for your attention.